Welcome to Folklore Files. Please subscribe to my channels so you don't miss videos like this one.
This in breasts, causing extreme pain and often leading to death by infection or hemorrhage. This is a shame mask, an instrument of punishment and humiliation used mainly in Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries. These masks were made of iron and designed grotesquely or exaggeratedly to ridicule the wearer. They were used to publicly punish individuals accused of gossiping, slander, or other disruptive behaviors in society at the time. The practice of drowning women accused of witchcraft was common during witch trials in medieval and early modern Europe. The process often involved throwing the accused into a river or lake, tied or weighted down. The brutal logic behind this test was simple. If the woman floated, she was guilty of rejecting the pure waters. In such cases, she would be retrieved and executed by other means. This engraving depicts execution by impalement, one of the most brutal punishments in history. Used primarily during the Middle Ages and by Vlad the Impaler, the condemned were forced to sit on a sharp stake, which was then raised, slowly piercing the body. This method, designed to cause an agonizing death, served as a public warning, commonly seen in conflicts and political repression. The image illustrates the use of the pillory, a public punishment method widely employed in Europe and its colonies during the 17th and 18th centuries. The condemned were secured by the neck and hands in a wooden structure, immobilized and exposed to public humiliation. Spectators often mocked, threw objects, or insulted the condemned, increasing their psychological and physical suffering. One of the most utilized methods in Europe as punishment was execution with a single blow to the nape to behead the victim. Initially, this process was carried out by the executioner wielding a sword, but during the Middle Ages, axes and chopping blocks began to be used. Additionally, a headrest for the condemned was implemented to facilitate decapitation. Later on, this event had an upgrade, so to speak, in the late 1700s, gaining popularity due to the French Revolution. A device known as the thumbscrew, an instrument of torture used primarily during the Middle Ages and early modern era. The mechanism consisted of two wooden or metal bars equipped with sharp pins or nails, tightened by screws to crush the victim's fingers. This practice inflicted extreme pain, crushed bones and tissue, and often caused permanent deformities. Pitch capping was a form of torture used during the Irish Rebellion of 1798. In this method, a cap made of paper or fabric was filled with substances like boiling tar, resin, or pitch, and forcibly placed on the victim's head. The scalding material burned the skin and scalp, causing extreme pain and permanent scars. In some cases, the cap was ripped off, taking pieces of skin with it. This engraving illustrates the use of the strappado, a torture method widely employed during the Inquisition and medieval periods. The condemned was suspended by their wrists, usually tied behind their back, and abruptly hoisted upward, causing joint dislocations and extreme pain. In some variations, weights were added to the ankles to intensify the suffering. The torture rack was one of the most cruel and emblematic instruments of the Middle Ages and the Inquisition period. The victim was tied by their wrists and ankles to rolling bars, which slowly stretched the body. This process caused joint dislocations, muscle and tendon ruptures, resulting in excruciating pain and permanent damage. This engraving illustrates a common public punishment method in medieval Europe and later periods, where a man is confined in a barrel of shame, a practice applied to drunks or petty criminals who were forced to parade publicly. These punishments were not fatal, but served as forms of public humiliation to discipline and disgrace the condemned before society. The practice depicted in the image is known as knout, a brutal form of corporal punishment widely used in Tsarist Russia. It consisted of lashes delivered with an instrument called a knout, made of a long leather strap reinforced with metal wires or hooks at the end, capable of causing severe injuries or even death. Keel hauling was a brutal form of punishment practiced by sailors, especially pirates and European naval forces, during the 17th and 18th centuries. The condemned was tied with ropes and dragged under the hull of the ship, passing beneath the keel. This punishment was used as severe onboard discipline or as a slow, painful execution. Vestal virgins, priestesses dedicated to the goddess Vesta in ancient Rome, were required to maintain a vow of chastity during their 30 years of service. Breaking the vow of chastity or allowing the sacred fire to extinguish was considered a severe crime and an ill omen for the city. When accused of breaking their oath, the Vestals were often judged based on political accusations or conspiracies. If found guilty, they were brutally punished by being buried alive. The penal treadmill, or punishment treadmill, was a device used in prisons in England and British colonies during the 18th and 19th centuries. Prisoners were forced to continuously walk on steps connected to a wheel, which powered mechanisms like pumps or mills. Initially designed for productive labor, it was often used solely for punishment, producing no tangible output. The mask of shame, a device used during medieval and modern periods in Europe as a form of punishment and public humiliation. Women accused of gossiping, indecent behavior, or having a sharp tongue were often forced to wear these metal masks. Some versions included bells or internal spikes, making the use even more uncomfortable and degrading. The individual was paraded through public places, subject to community scorn and mockery. Field punishment number 1 was a form of military discipline used by the British Army during World War I. Soldiers convicted of insubordination, desertion, or other minor crimes were tied to a post or fixed object, often in exposed areas, for several hours a day. Though not explicitly torturous, the punishment was extremely degrading and painful, as soldiers were forced to remain immobile, often in uncomfortable positions. A man who was a victim of a popular punishment method, known as tar and feathering, widely practiced in the 18th and 19th centuries, especially in the United States and Europe. This practice, often used for public humiliation, involved pouring hot tar over the victim's body and then covering them in feathers. The goal was to cause pain and disgrace, marking the individual as a social outcast. The process was painful as the hot tar caused severe burns. The practice of beating as punishment is one of the oldest and most recurrent forms of discipline in history, used to assert authority, correct behavior, or inflict suffering. In military and judicial contexts, beatings were often employed as public punishment to reinforce discipline and intimidate others. Cliff executions were used in some cultures and historical contexts as a form of public punishment, often designed to provoke both fear and psychological impact among the population. Victims condemned for serious crimes were thrown from great heights, resulting in immediate death.